Thank you, Madam Vice President. Good morning, Excellencies and delegates. It is my pleasure to address you on behalf of Equality Now, a feminist organization that works for a just world for all women and girls. The premise of my intervention is that there can be no equality in society without equality in the family. Inequality in the family is a root cause of economic violence, coupled with other factors emanating from retrogressive patriarchal gender norms. Globally, 1.4 billion women live in countries that do not recognize economic violence in their legal system or provide legal protection to victims of this form of violence. Economic violence refers to any act, behavior, or omission that limits the attainment of full economic, social, and cultural rights for women on the basis of gender stereotypes and sexist laws. I am particularly inspired by the inclusion of economic violence in Article 2 of the Protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the Rights of Women in Africa, the Maputo Protocol, which defines violence against women to include all acts perpetrated against women which cause or could cause them physical, sexual, psychological, and economic harm, including the threat to take such acts. The Maputo Protocol has been ratified by 45 of 55 AU member states and recognizes the protection against economic violence as core to the fulfillment of the rights to life, integrity, and security of the person. It further calls for the adoption of economic measures to ensure the prevention, punishment, and eradication of all forms of violence against women. Madam Vice President, the lack of legal protection and the existence of sexist, discriminatory laws, policies, and practices can give rise to economic violence and make women and girls even more vulnerable to exploitation. Controlling women's ability to acquire, use, and maintain economic resources in this way threatens their economic security and potential for self-sufficiency. Economic violence can manifest in different ways, often taking a gendered and intersectional nature. At an intimate partner level, economic violence can manifest in the form of financial control, prohibition of study or work, interference with a partner's education or work, hiding of personal documents, neglect or unequal childcare duties, failure to pay alimony or maintenance, amongst others. At a macro level, economic violence manifests in the form of undercounting of unpaid care work in the national economy, sexual harassment in the workplace, exploitation of women in advertising, lack of integration of the gender perspective in national and global fiscal and monetary policies, limitations of land and property ownership rights, lack of access to credit for women, the digital divide, and technologically facilitated gender-based violence that limit equal access to the digital space, and ultimately unequal family laws in areas such as marriage, divorce, inheritance, and discriminatory nationality laws. We see economic violence manifesting through legal pluralism, whereby women in religious and customary marriages particularly do not enjoy full legal protections. Child marriage continues to rob girls of the opportunity to attain an education, get good jobs, and build sustainable livelihoods. The lack of registration of marriages and lack of recognition of minority marriages deprives partners of spousal economic benefits, such as insurance coverage, pooled social security, and tax advantage. The lack of prohibition of domestic violence, including economic violence, and unequal divorce, child custody, inheritance, and matrimonial property legal regimes are particularly detrimental to the well-being of women. A new report by Equality Now, titled Gender Inequality in Family Laws in Africa, gives an overview of key trends in select countries, 20 in Africa, and it reveals pervasive discrimination in family laws, which in turn breeds economic inequality and economic violence. For instance, in one of the case studies featured in the report, Binta, not her real name, from the Gambia, narrates that upon her husband's death, his relatives seized the matrimonial home and all her property, leaving her and her children destitute. Binta's story speaks to why we need to reform our laws to protect women's economic rights and shield them from economic violence. Madam Vice President, every 5 years, Equality Now highlights explicitly sex discriminatory laws that need to be reformed in its Words and Deeds reports. As we gear up to the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Platform for Action, our latest update focuses on the impact of sex discrimination in economic status laws and what still needs to change. Insights from our report show that countries have laws that prohibit economic equality and which consequently enable economic violence and inhibit women's full economic participation and often expose them to exploitation. I will share a few examples. In Cameroon, a husband may object to his wife's exercise of a trade different from his. China's labor law automatically bars all women from engaging in mining, other forms of intense physical labor that the state specifies. Sri Lanka's matrimonial rights law restricts a married woman from disposing of and dealing with her own immovable property, such as land, without the written consent of her husband. The lack of explicit prohibition of discrimination on the basis of sex and lack of incorporation of the Equal Rights Amendment into the Constitution in the United States leaves women exposed to violence, including economic abuse. These examples are reflective of the World Bank's analysis of 190 economies, which demonstrate quite a number of countries still have discriminatory laws. Madam Vice President, while the situation appears bleak, states can draw inspiration from some good countries around the world, such as Belgium, Bulgaria, Croatia, Lithuania, in Kenya, my own country, Burundi, Russia, New Zealand, the Gambia, and finally from the United States. And there are a number of examples that we highlight in our Words and Deeds report. In conclusion, Madam Vice President, I would like to offer some recommendations that states could consider to take in order to redress the silent pandemic of invisibilized economic violence. Firstly, to enact comprehensive laws that criminalize sexual and gender-based violence and explicitly criminalize intimate partner violence, including economic violence. Secondly, to repeal or revoke marital power clauses designating husbands as the head of their households and ensure equal rights for men and women to acquire, administer, and manage their own property before, during, and after marriage. Thirdly, to ensure equitable sharing of the joint property deriving from marriage, including the recognition of non-financial contribution in cases of separation, divorce, or annulment of marriage in civil, customary, and religious marriages, and to criminalize the threat of property dispossession upon divorce or separation. Fourthly, to ensure equal labor rights, including equal pay for equal work and non-restriction of certain categories of work for women. And finally, to ratify, domesticate, implement, and lift reservations on the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the Maputo Protocol, the Inter-American Convention on the Prevention, Punishment, and Eradication of Violence Against Women, and the Council of Europe Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence. As I conclude, Madam Vice President, achieving gender equality in the family is one sure step towards realizing gender equality and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. If all women and girls are guaranteed the same rights within the family as their fathers, sons, brothers, and husbands, we will all be safer, more prosperous, and more secure. I thank you.